the US kind of dropped the ball with this. This is a criminal in his home country, according to legal filings. If Mexico was indeed pressuring for this guy to go back and face the justice system and nothing was being done about it in the US, it certainly leaves a bad taste. Welcome back to another episode of Borderland Dispatches, an Ironclad original. Today, we are getting into a story that shook a lot of people. Many were not surprised, but this became sort of national headlines in a way due to its bilateral nature. And that, as we know, is what happened to Julio César Chávez Jr., the boxer who had already faced some controversy, but this past news cycle showed that his controversy reached new heights. So on July 2nd, Julio was arrested by U.S. immigration. He was detained by ICE in Studio City, LA, while he was apparently riding a scooter. And this was just after losing to Jake Paul, a fight to Jake Paul. And when I tweeted about this, a lot of you had something to say about that and the fact that, it's funny because when you are a public figure, especially someone who's highly in the limelight in something that's competitive, the people are going to be very polarized in how they react to something that has to do with you, whether it's really like life-altering or not. But on another note, we're going to get into this. Julio seemed to have altered many other lives and not for good reasons. So USDHS cited his visa overstay. He had allegedly a fraudulent green card application and an outstanding a warrant for his arrest in Mexico that was like 2 years old. In January of 2023, so yeah, 2 years, there was a warrant out for Julio's arrest for organized crime charges, so arms trafficking, explosives, and this was directly linked to the Sinaloa Cartel. It's also important to keep in mind, Julio is from Sinaloa. Not only did he run into trouble with the law in Mexico, but also in the U.S. because he had U.S. convictions, including a DUI from 2012, and in 2024, January 2024, illegal possession of AR-style ghost rifles. It's come out that he allegedly was also beating people up for the Sinaloa Cartel. Julio was born in Culiacan, and we know, this is obviously a hot spot, and it's the birthplace of the Sinaloa Cartel, facing extreme infighting right now. But allegedly, he was the muscle man. Typically people from within the cartel who acted out or committed some form of betrayal, however they define that, were tied upside down, and Julio would use these people as basically human punching bags. And there seems to kind of be like a lack of understanding in obviously how severe this method of torture and violence is, because when I tweeted about this, people were saying, well, if you saw how he was in the fight with Jake Paul, he probably wasn't doing too much damage. I mean, guys, people were being tied upside down, getting the shit kicked out of them by a boxer. Need I say more? So what's happening right now is ICE is processing for Julio's expedition and he's being expedited and his removal to Mexico. And then Mexico is essentially ready to file all legal proceedings upon his return. Now, the timing of his arrest is quite interesting because obviously it happened right after a high-profile fight. And for some, it's raising questions about U.S. discretion and coordination with Mexican authorities. it also sends a message. Let's be for real. I mean, we've seen this uptick in ICE crackdown. I covered the protests in LA in a previous Dispatch episode. And what we're seeing is the US, ICE, DHS really cracking down on anyone and everyone. And it's certainly sending a message, especially to when they're cracking down on high profile figures who, in a way, I feel like in public opinion or perspective could be viewed as untouchable, air quotes for those listening. It's something that it's something that goes beyond, those really like emotionally triggering videos of a regular civilian being arrested at a Home Depot. This is, for a lot, a household name who's on TV and has a level of fame. Now, there is a pretty lengthy legal process that's ahead of this, and I don't know if some of you saw the news that his whereabouts seem to be unclear. So basically, at certain points in time, people who are detained by ICE don't show up right away in the detainee locator. And that happens basically because their detainment is being processed and they're being processed into custody, so they don't show up in the system. But Julio's been in ICE custody for a week at this point. Now, a DHS spokesperson said that there isn't really any information on Julio's detention and whether he will be deported or formally extradited to Mexico, where he obviously faces charges upon his arrival. His attorney was even publicly saying that he wasn't sure if Julio was still in the United States or not. It seems unclear as to where Julio is, if he remains in the US, if he is on his way to Mexico or in Mexico. This might change pending the uploading of this episode. But once he gets there, because of how high profile his situation is, he will immediately be processed by authorities, particularly because of how strong his ties are to the Sinaloa Cartel, his alleged ties. He has textbook organized crime charges waiting for him as soon as he touches down. And these very hefty accusations that he was beating people up for the cartel, for the Sinaloa Cartel, who right now we're seeing is, in the midst of a civil war. We talked about this in the last episode with Stefano. So if you are unsure what's going on over there, you could definitely check out that episode. But as for him getting back to Mexico, the two factors are his fame and his charges. And the Mexican government is not going to play around with that. They are going to be swift with their actions. And that also sends a message. Hey, we take this seriously too. We don't want this guy walking freely or having some level of impunity. So I'm curious to see how that's going to go, because also Chavez Sr., his father, was also a very high-profile boxer individual, and he's vocally supported his son and says that the public needs to distinguish personal associations from criminal guilt. But I think these charges go beyond a little mistake. So, again, Julio's lawyer even said that the allegations are being sensationalized and with aims to intimidate Julio. But at the end of the day, he has official charges in Mexico, which means enough evidence was gathered, an investigation went on, and Julio took off to the States. Now, again, this kind of brings up like the broader context of how organized crime, especially cartel ties, work with the bilateral relations between Mexico and the US, because Chavez appeared to be operating freely in the US, despite these very strong charges against him, the warrant against him in Mexico. And the Mexican Department of Justice has even accused the US of ignoring alerts and enabling his public appearance in major boxing events. So Mexico now is like, okay, you guys are sending him back. You guys got him for his immigration status, but we had been sounding the alarm that this person is, in the eyes of the Mexican Department of Justice, a criminal. Why was he living freely and operating essentially as a celebrity in the US? I also think that in a way this is a bit of a double standard, especially considering how hard the US has been cracking down on immigration and the southern border and labeling the cartels as terrorist organizations. And then you have an individual who is brazenly flaunting himself in the ring alongside Jake Paul for hundreds of thousands of people to watch across the US, across the world. And he has a warrant out for his arrest in Mexico, the US's next door neighbor. So in terms of sort of political security implications, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security has emphasized renewed enforcement against cartel associates. We know this, right? It's framed within this border crime policy shifts under this current administration. And someone like Julio fits right into this box. This is someone who has allegedly blatant ties to the Sinaloa Cartel, a warrant out for his arrest in Mexico, and doesn't have his immigration status shit together in the US, while he's also working in the US. So Mexican authorities have publicly criticized what they call the US's inaction, and they are saying that they're prepared to prosecute upon return, which also signals this sort of bilateral pressure and tensions in a way, because for the longest time, it's been the U.S. pressuring Mexico. And I honestly think the U.S. kind of dropped the ball with this. This is a criminal in his home country, according to legal filings. And if Mexico was indeed pressuring for this guy to go back and face the justice system, and nothing was being done about it in the US, it certainly leaves a bad taste. Now, this arrest shows how cartel influence extends into entertainment and sports, and I've been talking about this for a while, and I've been getting a lot of heat for it, that, it's separate from entertainment, music, sports, but these very people are often bragging about their ties to the cartel and the certain cartels that they support, and they are publicly flaunting this. And people seem to say, it's not an issue. It's something that's glamorized. It's something that it's fiction. When this breaks the third wall, Julio's case is a perfect example of how these very figures who are, or as they would say, indirectly showing support for some organized crime group, can actually be fully operating with them. To me, this raises the question of how far political visibility and this fame factor leads into legal protection or prosecution. Because how is it even possible that someone of this caliber managed to maintain a low profile in a way? Like, most people didn't know that he had a warrant out for his arrest in Mexico. And he didn't have a warrant out for his arrest for speeding or another DUI. It was for fully aiding the Sinaloa Cartel. I think that Mexico also has to kind of balance their expectations with navigating international optics and shared enforcement failures. Because this, I can only imagine, must be very frustrating for them. They are being pressured by the very government who is giving asylum to 17 family members of El Chapo. And they have this famous boxer operating, on Uncle Sam's territory who has a really big warrant out. Mexico can't expect the same level of crackdown to help them. And these are great examples of it. I'm not just guessing. Mexico can't expect the same level of cooperation from the United States that Mexico has been giving the United States. Like it or not, agree with me or not, I don't care. Mexico has been cooperating with the U.S. in terms of the southern border crackdown. They have been putting their resources to work. Canada, on the other hand, not so much. But in terms of the optics, yes, they've been doing their part. And so the optics in terms of Julio's case don't look great for the U.S. I mean, now we're here. Now we're getting to a point where he's going back to Mexico. Why does this case matter? Let's run through these points. First, it's about enforcement credibility, okay? It highlights the U.S.-Mexico struggles in disrupting cartel networks. Despite public alerts, these key figures have and are moving across the borders freely. That needs to be figured out. Second, policy shifts, okay? This reflects the U.S. inclination towards stricter targeting of cartel affiliates under current homeland security priorities. Who is on that priority list and how is that being dealt with? Because that has seemed unclear and a lot of people have been voicing their concerns about that. And I think this case really brings that to the forefront. Next, the cartel narrative, okay? This puts a spotlight on the blurred lines between entertainment, sport, and organized crime in Mexico. These are these ringside rumors now under a legal microscope. And I wouldn't be surprised if there seems to be more of a crackdown on household names, figures in pop culture, in the entertainment industry, who are found out to have ties or have alleged ties, and there's some sort of U.S. response to what can be said about these people, okay? We're probably all thinking about the same individuals in the entertainment industry, but innocent till proven guilty. Finally, this is a diplomatic flashpoint. The timing and handling could certainly strain bilateral law enforcement cooperation and increase public scrutiny. I think this case has frustrated a lot of people, and how it's going to be dealt with is also going to garner a lot of public reaction, especially going forward with the whole illegal immigration crackdown. What is this going to look like? Who is going to be the targets? Is there going to be a harder crackdown on people that actually have criminal records or warrants out for their arrest? The bottom line here is that Julio faces imminent deportation and prosecution in Mexico on serious cartel-related charges. These claims are not for the faint of heart, and his case truly underscores broader challenges in U.S.-Mexican cooperation on cartel enforcement, something that has been an issue for years and is now sort of coming to a head. And it also highlights how public personas can be entangled in these transnational criminal networks. Don't underestimate these people. I mean, I sure as hell don't, but you guys already know that. We are going what types of turns this case takes, where Julio's going to end up, because we should find out very shortly. And I'll keep you guys updated with all the details. Thanks again so much for tuning in to another episode of Borderland. Katarina Schultz, and as always, see you next time.